For years, economists had a name for this kind of political gamble: the worst-case scenario. They warned that a move this risky could unravel decades of global progress, but it was always a dark what if, something whispered about in academic papers and financial newsrooms. Then, in 2025, it happened. A single decision in Washington, D.C. lit a fuse that stretched across the entire planet. This is the story of how a 10% tariff ignited a global crash, and how everyday Americans are now paying the price. Number 1. The spark: a tax on the world. It all started in early 2025. The plan, on its face, sounded simple, even patriotic. The U.S. government announced a new baseline tariff of 10% on nearly all goods imported into the country. On top of that, steeper tariffs were aimed at specific countries, with rates hitting some goods from China particularly hard. The goal? To protect and rebuild American industries and push companies to bring manufacturing back home. Think of it like this: your local coffee shop has a competitor that gets its beans for a lot cheaper. A tariff is like the government forcing that competitor to pay a 10% tax on every bag of beans. Suddenly, their cost advantage is gone. That was the theory. But the global economy isn't a simple two-shop town. It's a massively complex web of supply chains, where the parts for a single product can cross borders dozens of times. The screen in your phone might come from one country, the processor from another, and the battery from a third, all before being assembled in a fourth and shipped to the US. By imposing a blanket tax, the policy didn't just tax finished TVs and t-shirts. It taxed the very guts of the American economy. And while some key goods like pharmaceuticals were given a temporary pass, the move still set the stage for a catastrophic chain reaction. Number 2. The first domino: supply chains and corporations. The first signs of trouble didn't show up on Wall Street's tickers. They showed up on the factory floor. For decades, American companies, from car makers to tech giants, had built efficient global supply chains, sourcing the best parts at the best prices to keep products affordable for everyone. Suddenly, that system was thrown into chaos. That 10% tariff hit everything. The German circuit board for an American-made medical device? Taxed. The Mexican-made wiring harness for a Ford F-150 assembled in Michigan? Taxed. The fabric from Vietnam used to make shirts in a North Carolina factory? Taxed. Companies faced an impossible choice: eat the massive new costs and watch profits vanish, or pass those costs directly to consumers. Most did a bit of both. The policy that was supposed to make America stronger was now actively making American companies less competitive. The economic projections were grim and immediate. Models warned of a steep decline in manufacturing production and employment. The very workers the policy claimed to protect were now directly in the line of fire. Number 3. The retaliation. The trade war begins. The world didn't just stand by and watch. When the planet's biggest economy decides to tax everyone, other countries don't just roll over, they hit back. This is the most predictable and dangerous part of tariffs: retaliation. One by one, America's biggest trading partners, the European Union, China, Canada, and Mexico, announced their own retaliatory tariffs aimed squarely at iconic American exports. American farmers saw markets for their soybeans shrink. American whiskey became a luxury item in Europe. American-made cars face new taxes in markets they'd spent decades trying to crack. It wasn't a policy anymore. It was a trade war. And in a war, everyone gets hurt. The numbers tell a story of self-inflicted economic harm. Nonpartisan researchers at the Penn-Wharton budget model released a startling projection. Once retaliation was factored in, the tariffs would cause long-run U.S. GDP to shrink. The markets, which had been jittery since the announcement, now went into a full-blown panic. The uncertainty was toxic. In March and April of 2025, markets from London to Tokyo were hit by severe volatility and sharp declines as the contagion spread. The worst-case scenario had arrived. Number 4. The contagion hitting home. A stock market crash can feel distant, but the consequences of this trade war were anything but. This is where the story moves from Wall Street to your street. The first and most direct hit was to your wallet. The tariffs were, in reality, a massive tax increase on American families. While estimates varied, analyses from groups like the Tax Foundation and Yale Budget Lab suggested the new costs would amount to a significant loss of income for the average household. Suddenly, anything that was imported, or just had imported parts, got more expensive. Your grocery bill went up. The price of new shoes, some facing tariffs as high as 40%, shot up. The cost of fixing your car, or buying a new home, was projected to jump. At the same time, any promised wage growth began to slow down. For many, it disappeared entirely. One analysis from the Yale Budget Lab projected that by the end of 2025, payroll employment would be nearly 600,000 jobs lower than it would have been without the tariffs. Jobs lost in sectors that rely on imported materials, like construction and retail, vastly outnumbered any small gains in protected industries. This is the hidden truth of a trade war. It doesn't just punish other countries, it punishes your own citizens. And the burden falls heaviest on those who can least afford it. But perhaps the most devastating forecast came from the Penn-Wharton budget model, which projected that a typical middle-income household was now facing a loss of $22,000 in lifetime income. This chain of events, from a political announcement to a depleted bank account, shows just how connected our world really is. Look, this stuff is complicated, but understanding these forces is the first, most critical step to preparing for them. If you're getting value from this analysis and want to understand more about how these global economic shifts affect your money, take a second to subscribe and hit that notification bell. Number 5. The why. An inevitable outcome. So, why was this crash so severe? How did one policy cause so much damage? The answer lies in a basic misunderstanding of the modern global economy. The system isn't a bunch of separate countries duking it out. It's a single, integrated machine. The 10% tariff wasn't a precision tool. It was a sledgehammer thrown straight into the gears. The crash was inevitable because modern wealth is built on the free flow of goods and capital. Tariffs, by their very nature, are friction. They block that flow. When you reduce imports, you also reduce the flow of foreign money coming back into the U.S. to buy American assets, including the government bonds that fund our national debt. That makes it more expensive for our own government to borrow money. On top of that, the financial system was already on edge. Before the tariffs, many economists were already pointing to risks like asset bubbles and unsustainable government debt. The tariff shock was the accelerant, pouring gasoline on an already smoldering fire and magnifying every existing fear in the market. What's wild is that the policy failed even by its own standards. It was supposed to boost American manufacturing, but instead, it crippled factories with higher costs and shut them out of export markets with retaliatory tariffs. It was supposed to make America wealthier, but instead, it triggered a market crash and is projected to reduce long-term GDP, wages, and household wealth. Conclusion: the big takeaway and the look ahead. The global crash of 2025 wasn't a random act of fate. It was a lesson, written in the red ink of the stock market and in the strained budgets of millions of American families. It's a lesson about what happens when simple solutions are applied to complex systems. It teaches us that walls built to keep others out can just as easily become a prison, trapping us in a cycle of higher prices, lower growth, and escalating economic conflict. The story isn't over. The long-term effects of this shock are still unfolding. Rebuilding shattered supply chains and restoring trust between nations could take years, if not decades. The key takeaway is this: in our modern world, there's no such thing as an economic action that only affects one country. Every decision sends ripples across the globe that will, without fail, find their way back home. Understanding how we got here is essential, because only by learning from the mistakes of the past can we hope to navigate the incredible economic uncertainty that lies ahead. Thanks for watching. What are your biggest concerns about the economy right now? Let us know in the comments below. And for more deep dives into the economic forces shaping our world, don't forget to subscribe. We'll see you in the next one.